All right, everyone, welcome. Today, we're going to dive into a really critical issue, one that's right at the heart of our modern societies, that complex, and let's be honest, often tense relationship between our personal freedoms and our need to feel safe as a community.
And this quote from Benjamin Franklin, it just perfectly frames the dilemma we're talking about. It really forces us to ask, where's the line? What price are we actually willing to pay for a sense of security?
Okay, so just to place this for you, this is designed specifically for your AMC curriculum. We're working within Theme 1, Faire, Société, how we build a society together, and we're focusing right in on our current axis of study, Liberté et Sécurité. And believe me, this topic is one of the biggest challenges to that balance today.
So, this is our guiding question for today. This is what we're going to try and answer, looking specifically at how the Anglophone world has grappled with this problem. Okay, let's get into it.
Here's how we're going to break it down. We'll follow a really clear path. We're going to start with how the threat is even defined, the power of words. Then we'll look at how governments have reacted with new laws and new technology. And finally, we'll really dig into the consequences for all of us and our fundamental rights.
First things first, we absolutely have to understand that how we react to terrorism is hugely influenced by how it's presented to us. The words, the images used by politicians, by the media, they are never neutral. They're designed to shape our understanding and, of course, our emotions.
And that brings us to this key concept, social construction. It's a big idea, but it's pretty simple. Terrorism isn't just an objective fact out there in the world. What it means, who gets labeled a terrorist, what actions count as terrorism, all of that is shaped by how we talk about it, by the stories we tell, especially in the media.
Now this is fascinating. Check this out. The scholar Alexander Spencer analyzed the British newspaper The Sun, and he found they used 4 main metaphors to talk about terrorism. And look at the implications. If you call it a war, then a military response seems totally logical, right? If you frame it as a crime, then you think about police and courts. Call it evil, and you open the door to dehumanizing the people involved. And if you call it a disease, well, then things like immigration controls can start to seem like a cure. This is a perfect example of that AMC notion of representation.
And here is a brilliant illustration of that in action. Look at the words butchers, mob. What this does is it completely strips away any political motivation. It paints the perpetrators as just savage, irrational criminals. And when you frame it like that, a tough, security-first response seems like the only sensible option. So let's see how this way of talking turns into law.
Right. So this perception, which is carefully shaped by words and metaphors, it doesn't just stay in the newspapers. It has very real, very concrete consequences. Governments create new, incredibly powerful laws that give the state a whole lot more authority.
And if you look at 2 very similar countries, say Australia and Canada, you see this huge difference in their response. Since 2001, Australia has passed something like 40 different anti-terror laws. That is a massive expansion of state power. Canada, on the other hand, just 2 major acts. So it just goes to show you there is no single, inevitable way to respond to this threat.
And these Australian laws give the state some pretty extraordinary new powers. Think about it. Control orders can restrict who you see and where you go, even if you haven't been convicted of anything. The security agency, ASIO, can literally detain and question people who aren't even suspects. So the crucial point here, the thing we really have to grasp, is that these security measures directly smash up against individual liberties and that bedrock legal principle of being innocent until proven guilty.
And then you layer technology on top of all this, the legal response gets amplified like you wouldn't believe, allowing governments to build these vast surveillance systems on a scale that was just science fiction a few decades ago.
The Edward Snowden revelations in 2013 were a complete game changer. I mean, they blew the lid off the sheer scale of this surveillance. The documents he leaked showed that the American National Security Agency, the NSA, had built a system that could tap into and analyze roughly 75% of all internet traffic in the US. Just let that sink.
And this isn't just an American thing, it's global. Through programs with names like PRISM, the NSA got backdoor access to servers from Google, Facebook, you name it. That data is then shared with its partners in the Five Eyes Alliance. That's the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And then these incredibly sophisticated programs sift through this ocean of data, your data, completely redefining what privacy even means in the 21st century.
Okay, so we've got the words that frame the threat. We've got the laws that grant the new powers. And we have the technology that makes mass surveillance possible. All of this comes at a cost. It has real-world consequences for our fundamental human rights. International law is supposed to protect these rights. They're fundamental. But as you can see, a lot of these new counterterrorism policies create a direct conflict. So what I want to do now is model a structured analysis of this conflict, using a method that's going to be super helpful for you in the baccalaureate.
Let's build a really clear, structured argument together. Ready? First, you make your point, your main idea. For example, these laws can erode the right to a fair trial. Simple. Next, you give an example as your evidence. A perfect one is the case of David Hicks, an Australian citizen. He was held at Guantanamo Bay for more than 5 years without a trial. And finally, the explanation. This is where you connect the dots. You explain that holding someone that long without charges completely goes against the ancient principle of habeas corpus, and it just violates the presumption of innocence. These are the cornerstones of liberty. So remember that structure. Point, example, explanation. It's golden.
So let's pull all these threads together now. It's time to formulate a clear answer to that guiding question we started with.
I think we've seen a really clear chain reaction, haven't we? First, the language used to represent terrorism justifies. Second, the creation of new laws in these huge surveillance systems, which results third in a direct and very real challenge to our most basic individual freedoms.
And this leaves us right back where we started, with that Benjamin Franklin quote, but hopefully with a much deeper understanding of just how complicated this is. It's a challenging question, and there are no easy answers. It also connects directly to other themes in our AMC program, like the role of new technologies and the nature of power itself. It's a debate that, I promise you, our societies are going to be grappling with for a very long time to come.